Right, I think we'll make a start. Good evening, everybody, and we're trying not to say it, but welcome to the final of the WallCAP community talks. And tonight you have the pleasure of the WallCAP team. We've got an hour to condense 4 years of WallCAP. For anyone who's not familiar with WallCAP, if this is the first time sort of hearing about it, it's the Hadrian's Wall Community Archaeology Project, funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund and hosted at Newcastle University. We have a staff team of which most of us are on the call tonight, and you'll probably hear from everybody. So if I can ask a little wave from Dr. Rob Collins, who's our project manager. We've also got Dr. Ian Keel, who's our community geologist. Thanks, Ian. We've got Dr. Jane Harrison, who's our community archaeologist. And we've got, people are waving back, this is very cute. And we've also got Catherine Murphy, who's our project officer, tech wizard and archaeologist. Have I missed anybody? Not from the staff team, I don't think. We have some of our lovely volunteers on the call, and we've got some new faces, so that's great for us. So what we're going to do is take you on a very whistle-stop tour of what's been achieved on WallCAP over the last 4 years. So I'm going to invite some of our colleagues to share their screen and give an overview of the different areas of work. The first one will be the Heritage at Risk strand of the project. Then we'll look at the stone sourcing and dispersal element of the programme, and then we'll move on to digital outputs, and then finally looking at the overall successes of the project, of which there are many, and sort of reflections, and also looking forward, what happens after WallCAP. So without further ado, because we don't have a lot of time, I'm going to invite Jane to share your screen and we'll get started.
Okay, so I'm going to, in 10 minutes, just whiz through the extraordinary amount of work that we managed to achieve in the Har strand, mainly due to the incredible input from the amazing volunteers who worked so hard. They were such fun and so committed, and thank you all very much. I'm not going to look at sort of the vegetation clearance and things like that. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what we've done. Here are all the sites that have been covered in the Heritage at Risk strand. And as a result of work we've done, a number of sites have actually been removed from the Heritage at Risk register, and this was really important for us to achieve. And that includes in the central section the sites where we did repairs and consolidation and investigation at Cat Stairs and Peel Gap. The excavation work at Walltown Crags, which was paired with some conservation and reprofiling at a beautiful stretch of the length of wall that hasn't been affected by John Clayton's work. Mucklebank Turret, that's just near to Walltown Crags, had conservation reprofiling work done on it. And Port Carlisle, that sturdy little reminder of faced wall that just survives out in Port Carlisle, all of those have been about to be removed from the Heritage at Risk register. So that's a fantastic result. We've also got, from all the sites that we did work on, additional vital management information, including from Cambeck and Walltown Crags and Heading on the Wall, and for all those sites, increased understanding and appreciation of all the things that happened in the Roman period at them. At Heading on the Wall, we were looking at the way in which the vallum had survived under quite a rigorous ploughing regime on a sloped field. And we did manage to record the remnants of the vallum, which you can see highlighted on that long coloured section. And one of the key things that we did manage to get was a radiocarbon date from the first deliberate backfilling of the vallum. So it had silted up a little bit naturally, but this was the first deliberate filling in. And that didn't happen until at the earliest, the late 12th century, which is quite interesting, and coincided perhaps with an expansion of agriculture in the area. At Port Carlisle, and there you can see that tiny little bit of faced wall, which is the only bit that survives in the western area. You can see it sitting there to the left of a gate gap. And there we were able to do some very complex work reprofiling, consolidating and protecting the surviving wall, moving that gate over to an area where the wall had been completely obliterated, doing a lot of recording of surviving bits of core and of the wall, and very crucially, of the way in which the wall had been constructed in that area. And we were able to highlight the way in which the wall builders used the local landscape to their advantage and ran the wall along a harder ridge of glacial material, which helped protect it from the flooding of the Solway Firth. We did two larger excavations, and that was Cambeck and Corbridge. And Cambeck, I think, is dear to all of us on the team, because it was our first excavation back with volunteers, with you all, after lockdown. And it was a glorious and rather euphoric event for that reason, and we got the most glorious results. This was a look at a place where the wall crosses a minor river. There have been two investigations of major river crossings at Corbridge and at Chester, at Corbridge, not at Corbridge, at Birdoswald, at Willowford and at Chesters, but nothing on a minor crossing. And very little was known about the gorge here at the Cambeck itself. And it's an unusual site as well, because we have a wall fort that's actually detached from the wall with the vallum swooping down round it. So something has prompted the wall creators here to do something a little bit different when they constructed the complex that is the monument in this location. And we think it's probably because the fort is sitting on higher ground, looking out to the northwest, where the most likely location of any attacks might well have been. And the wall follows the best topographical line for it and for crossing the beck. And it crosses the beck in a location where you can set up a tower and have a really good view of what's happening in the gorge, and you can protect that area too. So all along we were finding that working along the length of the wall was giving us some really good perspectives on the ways in which those building and using the wall interacted with the particular local landscapes. Now, this is the Cambeck Trench, very red, as you see. And the earliest phase that we found was turf wall, and we got radiocarbon dates for that, which fitted beautifully with the dates for the turf wall, but also for a detached tower building with the same range of radiocarbon dates, which stratigraphically was in the same phase as the turf wall. So it seems that possibly here the turf wall may not have crossed the gorge, but they had this detached tower that gave the wall watchers a really good view across the gorge to be able to protect and look at what was happening. The second phase was when the stone wall was built. And again, we have got some good radiocarbon dates. And then we have a tower that's incorporated with the wall and with either a ramp or a set of stairs running up to it. And again, with a good view over the gorge. And it's here when we think that there was actually a bridge created incorporating the tower. But also, very excitingly, we have this separate building outlined in blue that is unique so far. It was a wooden building with probably thatched roof that belongs stratigraphically to the same phase as the stone wall with the tower and the stairs. So it was a really interesting set of results from Cambeck with a lot of information to help with its future management. And this is just the beginnings of a visualization of what we think the crossing would have looked like. You need to think of the separate building down here, just near the little group of soldiers, and another tower we suspect on the west bank as well. Now, Catherine and I did a very wet and windy excavation, and Rob as well, when he was able to come out of the curtain wall at Walltown Crags. And that gave us a really good look, both at the way in which the wall was built, straight onto bedrock, and you can see exposed bits of the wall running here over bedrock, a turret founded on bedrock, and the bit of wall that we exposed sitting on bedrock, but then with phases of collapse. So we were able to not only look at the construction of a piece of wall that has been under the ground for absolutely centuries, but also at the ways in which it had collapsed. And we have given that information again to our reconstruction artist, who's been building a set of views of what happened to the wall in this area over the centuries. And then our final big excavation was at Corbridge. Again, we weren't inundated with Noah's floods like the first excavation on this site, and we were able to have a really good look and an assessment of the condition of the Roman archaeology north of the English Heritage Site. And we opened these two trenches, and just to show you where those fit in, this is the English Heritage Site, which mostly consolidates the late 2nd to early 3rd century activity on that site, which had begun way back in the 80s with the first of four forts. But by the period that's consolidated, it had become a legionary base and supply depot surrounded, and you can see it in the geophysics, by a rapidly growing and extensive town. And we were looking north of the road here, in this field here, where you can see there's clearly a good deal of archaeology. And importantly, Deer Street, one of the important reasons why Corbridge was sustained in this location is that it's at the east-west, south-north meeting of two major roads, the Staingate and Deer Street. And Deer Street was seen in the geophysics and in earlier excavations to run through this field and into the field we were working at, just to the west of one of our trenches, with a spur road running off here. And here you can see, looking at a slightly different angle, this is Deer Street running here. This is that spur road. And here you can see the two trenches. And what we found was that in this trench, we were just east of a probably quite high status, either military or important civilian persons, domestic probably building. And we were looking at the yard that belonged to that building in the main phase of activity in this trench, which was actually probably the same period as has been consolidated on the English Heritage Site, sort of the later 2nd into early 3rd century. And the area that we exposed has got half of the wall, which showed the ways in which it had been relaid and patched. Also, this lovely coursed stone conduit, which actually runs under the road and then goes this way and probably runs down the side of Deer Street right into the centre of the town, because you pick that up when you get to the English Heritage Site. But in the yard in that period, there was probably a blacksmith's. There was a small stone-founded, open-sided building here with another wall and structure leading to the main house, with flagging at the back of the yard, probably with a storage area as well, and a cobbled area which may have allowed, which was where you came into when you came over flagstones and into the yard. Later, there was a period of demolition and levelling, which is probably at the point where the town retreats behind 4th century walls. And then you get a series of pits dug into that levelling. And one of those was this absolutely fascinating deposit here. We're not absolutely certain whether it was a deliberate cremation burial or a deliberate structured deposit of some kind. But there was a huge greyware jar full of burnt bone, with the identification of human bone proving quite difficult, but definitely with a lot of animal bone, including roe deer and some crane. But this huge jar was packed around with complete decorated greyware and beautiful Samian platters and bowls, and with some wonderful glass as well, some of which had been in the cremation, however that was constituted, that was packed into the jar. And in the other trench, we had one of these long buildings, short end onto the road, which we suspect in its main phase of activity was some kind of shop or perhaps making some kind of food. There's a big oven there and possibly 2 other little hearths, a trough and drainage for water. Next to it, a domestic annex where perhaps the people who ran that shop lived, but certainly we had lots more evidence for people living there. But what we got from these 2 trenches, apart from a really good perspective on the survival here in this playing field, was the immediate was the understanding that Corbridge, when it became a legionary base and store place, was also an extensive and planned town right from the beginning, and a very busy and place where structures like the water conduit were built into a planned framework from the very beginning. So that was a really interesting. And here you can just see a quick view of that very large storage jar, which had the burnt bone and melted glass vessels in it, and some of the beautiful Samian, near complete Samian vessels that were coming out. But the fascinating thing that we got from this was the radiocarbon date, which was Bronze Age. And we still haven't thought this through completely because the date has only recently arrived. But it suggests that either earlier cremation burials were disturbed or that there was some kind of heirloom that was involved in this deposit. But it's probably, because we've also got a Bronze Age barbed and tanged arrowhead, that we are interacting here with the prehistoric landscape as well. And finally, this is again one of the early versions from our reconstruction artist of how that bit of Corbridge town might have looked in the 2nd into early 3rd centuries. I'm going to stop there to allow people to have questions later, and please do ask, but thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody. Lovely to see you all. Lovely to see some familiar faces and some not so familiar faces. So my turn now to talk about the stone sourcing and dispersal project. There is nothing like enough time to be able to get through all of the material that has come out of the stone sourcing and dispersal project. So what I would simply like to do is to walk through some of the things we've done and give an indication of the things which I feel have been important in terms of what this project has done. As with Jane, I would like to acknowledge that one of the things that personally for me has been one of the great successes of this project has been the deep pleasure of meeting lots of lovely volunteers and working with them during this project. So it's a big thank you to all of you for your company and your time and your energy and enthusiasm as far as this project is concerned. All very welcome. So stone sourcing and dispersal. So the other thing which I would like to put out there as well is that unlike the HAR project, a lot of the work that has been done as part of the stone sourcing and dispersal project is not work which has been tried and tested over the years in terms of running public digs and how you do archaeological digs. A lot of the work that we've done here is new and untested. And in consequence, there's been quite a steep learning curve in terms of what's happened as we've gone along through this project. So we set up a project which was broken out into a series of stages. And the thing which has been important to me as far as this set of pieces of work, the understanding the geology, inspecting the wall, unearthing the wall's rocks, looking at where the material has come from, and then investigating where that material has gone to. The thing for me which has been as important as anything about this part of the project is the opportunity to actually spend time looking at a whole range of different parts of the wall, and not just looking at them as man-made objects, but looking at where they've come from and the landscape in which they sit. And that opportunity to be with and sit and think and reflect on the wall in the outdoors, I think has been one of the things which to me has been very important about this particular project. So with understanding the geology, we have had an opportunity not only to look at geological objects which are right next to the wall, but we've also been able to explore and expand an understanding of the geology and the context of the Hadrian's Wall with trips out to places like not only Haltwhistle close to the wall, but places like Tynemouth, and also out to Rockcliffe to look at some of the older rocks which forms the foundations of what's going on by way of Hadrian's Wall geology. We've been and visited large numbers of sites on the wall, so Chester's, Heddon, Plane Trees, Denton, and a whole pile of other places along the wall. And we've also been out and we've looked at possible sources for the rocks that were used in order to construct those walls in the locations. So we've been to places like Fallowfield and also to King's Crag nearer to Housesteads. But also we've had the opportunity in this part of the work to be able to explore different types of quarrying, so visiting an active heritage quarry at Ladycross and looking at a modern quarry for comparison. And also, again, for me, something which has been really important is to be able to not only look at the rocks, but actually touch and feel them and see the way they respond. And the work that we did to actually do some stone carving has been something which I've hugely enjoyed, and certainly the response that we've had to this, it seems to have been a really good way of getting a sense of what it would have been like for the Roman legionaries in terms of actually working with stone to construct the wall. And then we've had the opportunity to look at the many buildings that may or may not have Roman stone in them, which has been a fascinating process in its own right. And all of this has created huge amounts of data, which I'll come back to in a moment. I just want to mention in passing that some of the other things that have been important, I think, as we've gone along, is that during lockdown, it was possible through the use of online material in terms of blogs and newsletters and presentations to be able to give some continuity to what was going on, and also some guides in order to continue the training work which happened as part of this project. So coming back to the data collection, so in total we have got a whole pile of data which has come from the volunteers' hard work. We have another set of data which has come from geochemistry, and we also have a huge amount of data which has come from sample collection and turning those into thin sections. And all of that material is now going to provide a legacy of material in terms of a fantastic set of images which it's been possible to create from the images, giving us a lot of data, which there is some time which is available within the WallCAP project to be able to process, but is there in perpetuity and is a fantastic legacy from the project. And this includes analytical data, not only in terms of the types of minerals grains, but also things like these porosity analyses and grain size analysis. There's also been contributions to the various exhibitions which have happened a lot as part of WallCAP, which I guess Rob will probably mention a bit later. And we have been able to use that knowledge and that data in order to start out to tease out some of the stories about how the material of the wall has been put together. So, for example, this really neat example of black carts, where we can see two very distinct types of wall stone which have been used to construct the wall, which gives some insight into the way, the order of construction of the wall. And we've also, using the thin section work, we've been able to deduce some quite interesting stories. For example, here at Port Carlisle, in terms of, and there's some grey wackies which have been brought into the area by glacial, in consequence of glacial ice movements from the north. So these have come from across the top of the Solway and have appeared within the core of the wall. And also we've been able to look at core material, Port Carlisle here, in order to deduce their likely source from the St Bees sandstone, and that these have been categorically brought into the area rather than being locally quarried. We've also been able to use the large amount of data which the volunteers have collected and have been put into databases now and again are available to start doing analysis using, for example, the size data of the wall to be able to give us some information. And also some volume data to be able to do some calculations about the relationship between the wall and buildings in which wall material has probably been reused. And there is continuing work, and this is again something which I see as being a really important part of what the WallCAP project has achieved, is the relationship between geology, and to fly the flag for what geology can actually do when it's used in conjunction with archaeology to tell us more about what's going on. And there is more to come out of the work that's been done at Cambeck. There's some really interesting stories which are starting to emerge from that in terms of the geological samples that were taken there and the relationship between probably facing stone material within the dig, the native stones that you can find actually in the cliff faces next to the weir, and what the weir is actually made of. So samples taken from here, and here are some of the thin sections that have been made from that, and there's more to be analysed here. So watch this space. The final thing which I want to end with, because I suspect that I am running close to the time available already, is to say that one of the things that this particular process has uncovered is not only what we can use the geology and archaeology combined to tell us new things about the way in which the wall was constructed, where it was constructed from, where those quarries are, and where that stone has been reused. But it also provides us with some boundaries, if you like, in terms of the things that we may not ever be able to understand. And it has been through the combination of the geochemistry, the petrography, and indeed the enormous amount of data that volunteers have produced that we've been able to put some bounds on that. And it is through doing comparative work with that and looking at the way in which geological material can be categorized, and in particular using some of the information that has been gleaned from the way in which the oil industry needs to know precisely where it is in order to be able to understand how oil fields and indeed how coal fields in the past actually work. But we have some other things which may help us to take this story even further beyond the end of the WallCAP project. And this little beautiful scarab-coloured mineral, which you can see in the middle of the screen here, which is a zircon taken in thin section and across polarised light, which produces these beautiful colours. And zircon is a very interesting mineral, which is a relic from previous incarnations. So it is formed within igneous and metamorphic rocks, which existed in the mountains, which were eroded in order to create the sandstones which we see here. So they tell something of a previous time, and we can use the combination of zircons and other heavy minerals such as pyroxene, tourmaline, garnet, and others, and to look in detail inside the geochemistry of these minerals in order perhaps to tell us even more about where the stones have been sourced from and where they've been reused. So again, once again, a really big thank you to the volunteers, and I have to say that this picture is one that really, in my mind, says a lot about the sheer wonderfulness of working out in the fields with the volunteers on this particular project. So thank you very much indeed.
So I'm just going to do a quick run through of some of our digital outputs. So our big output for the project for the digital side is the WallGIS. And so what you can see on screen is a screenshot of the database that's the backbone of the WallGIS. So we've ended up with 517 records. And this doesn't look like much, this table, but it is the culmination of 2 years of work, and it couldn't have been completed without the help of about 50 volunteers. So thank you very much for all your help with that. So the database has now been finalized, and each wall feature has a record in the database and an associated GIS layer in the mapping. So you can see a screenshot of that on your screen now. So the forts, they were all, I georeferenced a site plan for each of the forts and then traced the outlines. That's how I've created those shapes. The mile castles and turrets, I used known measurements from excavations to create kind of little rectangles or squares that represent those sites based on the measurements. And then if we didn't have a known measurement, I've kind of created just a generic square to represent those shapes or those sites. And we've also created these discovery areas around sites that we don't know for sure if they exist. So these are assumed sites for turrets and mile castles that we don't know if they exist based on, we only know that those locations are the locations based on measurements from known mile castles and turrets along the wall. So at the moment, those are the discovery areas kind of showing this unknown sort of area is represented by these longer rectangles that are lying along the wall, and just kind of giving us an idea that there's some unknown, there's sort of a bit of fuzziness around their locations. And the thing I've been working on this past week since our gathering is the GIS layers, linking those to the database themselves. So now when you click on any of the mile castle turrets or fort sites, or any mile of the wall vallum or the wall ditch, the associated records from the database are linked to that and now pop up when you click on that. So you can see that running down the side of the screen. So it's really exciting to kind of have that all brought together into the maps now, and that will be what we kind of leave as a legacy for the project. And I'll talk about that in a few minutes. I just wanted to touch on all of our digital events that we've run over the last few years, and we ended up having a much larger digital presence than we kind of imagined we would at the beginning of the project. And so in the end, we had 101 digital events, and this included 22 public talks, 2 virtual networking days, 20 tea breaks with the volunteers, and 24 book club sessions. So we've ended up with many, many events covering a broad range of topics. And with all of these digital events, especially the talks that we've been able to record, we're leaving a massive resource and library of these videos on our YouTube channel. So we're going to end up with 78 videos online that will stay there after the project ends. And that gives us talks from experts across archaeology and geology that anyone can access into the future. And I'll just quickly touch on archiving of the project and how you're going to be able to access WallCAP data once we're finished. So when all of the data is going to the Archaeology Data Service, or ADS, and they will be hosting it for us. And ADS is long-term stable digital archiving of our data, and will provide free access to all of the data in perpetuity. So this is an example of what the wall GIS will look like on ADS. So this is the Rural Settlement of Roman Britain project, but we'll have some similar interface to this. So there'll be a map. All of the data will show up on the map, and you'll be able to interact with that. Click on any of the sites and get the information that you need. You'll also be able to search the database with keywords or sort of more advanced search if you have more in-depth queries that you want to ask of the data. And you'll also be able to download all of the database files as well as the GIS layers to play with those in mapping software if you'd like. For HAR and SSD, it'll look a little bit more like this. The HAR sites the HAR data will be organized by site that we've been excavating at, and SSD data will be organized by activity type, and you'll be able to access all of our reports and the specialist reports for the excavations. And for SSD, we've got all of our guides that Ian has written, and a lot of our data for the stone recording that was collected by volunteers that is now going to be accessible for you to download and look at in the future. So all of that data will be available for free and open access to anyone who wants to access it. And that was just a very quick overview, so we've got lots of time for questions and other things. So thank you.
What I would like to talk to everyone about is just a few minutes of, kind of 5 to 10 minutes, just kind of go over some of the project successes and reflections of the project. WallCAP has been very successful, despite actually the unexpected global pandemic, which we all faced. And that's due very largely to the commitment of our volunteers, as well as the team that's speaking here tonight. So what did that consist of? Who were our volunteers? Who's involved? I'd like to then also talk about what we did, and then basically what's come out of the project, so that anyone who's interested in project results knows where to be looking for those results and those answers and those interpretations. So our volunteers started off at a high number, partly because we had what you could call a warm-up phase, phase 1, which is part of all lottery projects, where we were able to test out some of our methodologies and get permissions and work out in detail what we were going to do throughout the duration of the project. So many of those people that joined us in that first phase stayed with the project. So we started the project with 130 registered volunteers. By the end of the project, we've had 407 registered volunteers. And what's fantastic is you can see on the chart there that we've had steady growth throughout the entire project. You might reasonably expect there to be a dip during COVID lockdown, but actually, because of the digital pivot, the digital turn that we made in the project that Catherine just kind of talked about with various online events and talks and sessions, it meant we were able to actually expand a bit and reach out to a more global audience of volunteers. And those volunteers consisted of a wide range of people, I'm very happy to say. So you can see from the graphs here that there's a very nice mix of men and women of different age groups. And that it wasn't just a small limited demographic. So that was something that we worked hard with to try and make sure we reached various audiences, especially Carrie. And I'm happy to say that that's been achieved. And those volunteers were drawn from a much wider area than Hadrian's Wall country itself. Now, the project was always intended to be a project that focused more on local audiences, local communities, local volunteers. And you can see that the counties that host Hadrian's Wall, Cumbria, Northumberland, Tyneside, had the kind of greatest number of volunteers. But you can see those other areas of Britain, shaded green, where there were other volunteers who were joining us and contributed to various digital events or things that could be done from a distance. For example, the GIS project that Catherine mentioned, but also data recording and data entry for some of the stone recording work that we did, which is excellent. And actually, you can zoom out from Britain and see that there are volunteers from other countries in the world too. This wasn't just a British volunteer project, which is fantastic. And those volunteers had various employment status. So it wasn't only people who are now retired, which are traditionally the largest contingent of volunteers in the UK. But you can see there on that graph in the lower left that there's a number of other people. So people who are even in full-time employment, for example, were making time to participate in the project. And that's great. The more voices we have, the greater range of audiences and more diverse the volunteers are, the more we can try and accommodate and also speak to a wider range of people going forward as well. So what did these volunteers do? Well, the answer is quite simply a lot. If you just go by very simple calculations of how many people at each given event, there's over 4,100 participations. There's 183 events across a total of 1,369 project days. That basically averages out to one event per week. It's actually slightly higher than that. But to make it look pleasant, we'll just say one event a week. So I can assure you, project team members did take holiday, but there were some weeks where we had multiple events as well. And in some cases, that obscures the fact that actually our 4-week-long excavation at Corbridge in 2021, for example, counts really as one event, despite the fact that it ran for 4 weeks straight. And you can see those number of events on the graph there. On the right-hand side of the screen, we were gearing up in the first part of the project, then COVID hit, so that's where the low bits are. And then once we were able to get back out in the field and start involving volunteers in local communities again in more direct face-to-face contact. there were more than 20 different types of events and activities that people could register for. The list here isn't all 20, just for space saving. I've kind of clustered a few of those, but that included various techniques that people were trained in or learned about related to geology, related to archaeology. It also included things that were meant to be more about well-being and just being nice, sociable people, like the tea breaks or the book club, for example. We also tried to make sure that volunteers and participants had access to a range of different voices. So it wasn't just myself and the rest of the WallCAP team that people heard from, but we invited other experts from other frontiers or other parts of Hadrian's Wall, other aspects of the heritage sector, to all participate and give talks so that people participating could get a more rounded view of what heritage and archaeology constitutes. And what that broke down to was 367 volunteers attending over 21 events related to HAR, 168 volunteers at over 20 events related to SSD, and that list goes on. So you can see that there's a whole range of different types of activities that can be clustered together. So WallCAP wasn't just trying to do any one thing, as I hope you've gathered from what Ian and what Jane and what Catherine have said, but actually we tried to offer a whole suite of activities to help people engage with the past and Hadrian's Wall. And you can see from the map that we've been busy. These are the sites where we've done various bits of field work, one of the wonderful maps that Catherine has whipped up for us throughout the project. And you can see that we've not just looked at any one part of the project, we've been very careful to try and look across the entire length of the monument so that we could interact with volunteers and communities all throughout the World Heritage Site. And this actually, all this work, as you can imagine, has resulted in a number of what in the university sector we call outputs, but let's say the things that get published or are left behind, the physical traces of a project. Very quickly summarizing it, those that are more public facing include 3 exhibitions, a series of volunteer guides, which will become available, 21 talks, lectures on our YouTube channel, 3 articles in more popular magazines, and a project monograph, which will be free to every volunteer. The project will get a free copy, which should appear sometime in 2023. But we also have academic facing monographs and professional facing outputs. And that's because if you think about archaeological work, it is destructive by nature. Whenever you excavate something, you are destroying that archaeological record. So it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we publish that in full detail so that future archaeologists and researchers understand what we've encountered. So what that means is we will have 2 academic books or monographs, one which is the results of the HAR fieldwork, excavations along Hadrian's Wall, and another which is the results of the SSD fieldwork. That's the Fabric of the Frontier book there. So you can see proofs of the covers are already made. There's also been at least 4 papers in various academic journals and books. And the Wall GIS that Catherine was talking about is a huge, huge asset and a huge output. This is something that some of us have perhaps sadly fantasized about for many decades now, but actually no one organization has ever pulled together a GIS containing all the information about Hadrian's Wall. And that's a huge, huge accomplishment. And what's great is that will be available to everyone via the ADS archive once the project's over. The exhibitions are ones that you can visit now, in fact. So we have 3 exhibitions. There was a temporary exhibition at the Sill, which is the National Landscape Discovery Center for Northumberland National Park. I'm afraid that's no longer up, but we have contributed and worked with Tully House Museum Art Gallery and the Great North Museum Hancock in Carlisle and Newcastle, respectively, to contribute to their permanent galleries. And you can go visit those galleries now and see what's been done and what's there. At the Sill, we had the Stories in Stone exhibition, which focused very much on human stone, human geology relationships. It consists of a number of panels and some objects and some interactive displays as well. At Tully House, it's the permanent roaming gallery, which is on the 1st floor, in which they worked with a local artist to help enhance the interpretation and actually move a lot of the objects that were on display around to make it a bit more modern and understandable to more modern audiences from when it was last renovated. And at the Great North Museum, we worked with a company to produce laser projection and interpretation of 7 altars in the corner of the Hadrian's Wall Gallery that not only provide a sense of what these may have looked like in full color in the past, but also provide some animation to interpret what these altars would have meant to those people in the past, to try and communicate that to more modern audiences who aren't au fait and used to worshiping in the Roman fashion. So WallCAP has been extremely busy throughout its 4 years. I'm going to stop sharing the screen, so you're going to be stuck with my face. WallCAP has been very busy throughout its 4 years of project work, and all the successes we've had are very largely due to the volunteers and also the stakeholder organizations that we've been able to work with throughout the project. It's really a great testament to the Hadrian's Wall community at large, that so many different people and so many different organizations can work together and collaborate to kind of resolve all these issues, such as taking monuments off the Heritage at Risk Register. That's been brilliant. Those are things that are absolutely essential to make sure that the wall is here for the future, but also kind of new cutting edge research that Ian points to, that, you know, the way geology and archaeology can work together and have a much better understanding of how people in the past and in the present interact with their environment, especially at a period when we're worried about you know, climate change and environmental sustainability. WallCAP will end at the end of this month as a lottery funded project. But one of the things that we always intended from the start is that this project, through lottery support, was intended to create a brand, as it were. That WallCAP is a brand, which is not just ours on the project team, but is yours for you who are members of the communities along Hadrian's Wall, and that WallCAP is something that can be of the people and for people to take forward. And so I know Carrie has been working with various volunteers and other community groups so that that can continue to progress and go forward. And actually, I think we have some really nice hopes of things that are likely to happen in the future. And with that, I'd just like to say thank you very much to everyone again, but also to sing the praises of the fantastic WallCAP team who have worked very hard, very diligently, very creatively throughout any number of trying circumstances. The big lesson learned for me is we always now plan for a global pandemic going forward, so that we can try and accommodate what, instead of having to reinvent things overnight. But without the WallCAP team, this project would not have been possible. And I know that they have enjoyed all the time that they've had with volunteers and the insights that working with the public has brought. So thank you very much, everyone. And I'm now very happy to take questions.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, everyone, team-wise as well, for chipping in there. Thank you for all the applause that are popping up. That's great. Yeah, if there's any questions, anyone has any, even just comments or questions or just a reflection of your own from being involved in WallCAP, or from if you're new to WallCAP this evening, if there's anything that sort of strikes you that you'd like to make, a point you'd like to make. Yes, Jane, if you'd like to unmute, Jane Bransom, that's great. Feel free.
Well, just to say, just absolutely fantastic project and well done, everybody. And it's really, really great to hear that, Kerry, that you're moving forward on it. But that GIS to finally got to the point where there's going to be a GIS for Hadrian's Wall, which has been in the pot for what, 30 odd years or so. So well done. There's huge things that you can take credit for, but I think that's a very, very big thing for the World Heritage Site. Just well done.
Great, thanks, Jane. Rob, did you want to comment back on the GIS? Because I know it's been a pet project of yours for about, well, maybe not quite 30 years.
Yes, but Jane's absolutely right. It's been something that's been called for at least 30 years. It's fantastic. It's really nice to see that happening. And now we just hope that other stakeholders will have the opportunity to use it and make use of the GIS, so that it's not just something that sits on a public facing and accessible archive, but actually gets real use. I'm certain that I will use it because I'm a total nerd and geek, but it'd be nice to see other stakeholders use it as well. I think something I should probably point out, which I meant to and I completely forgot, is Catherine said, all this information, a lot of this data will be archived. We're handing over on a daily basis, I say we, Catherine is doing the hard work of emailing and uploading all the digital files to the ADS on a daily basis. We can't say for certain when ADS will make all those archives available, but they will. It just depends on their workload as well. But I suspect it will appear in 2023, if not beforehand. And some of those publications I talked about as well. Those are very close to completion, but they need to go to publishers and be printed and such. And so those will also appear in 2023. So we do ask for a little bit of patience while some of those reach press.
Thanks, yes. Lady Jane, go for it.
So this is just the best project, just the best project. And it hadn't really occurred to me when Rob told me that what the timescales were, that actually meant that there was a point in life when this project wasn't going to exist. And in fact, of course, Rob, there's been an extension, hasn't there, because of COVID. So National Lottery Heritage Fund actually gave you and I think an extra full year, which clearly you've all made such brilliant use of. But it seemed completely impossible to me as chair of the partnership board that on the 30th of September there would be a project called WallCAP, and that on the 1st of October there wouldn't. It just wasn't feasible, because the partnership board, as Rob said, you know, the various stakeholders along the wall are so dependent on their communities. You know, it doesn't work. It's not anybody's wall. It's all of our walls, and therefore the people who live locally, the people, as Rob said on the map, the people who are interested even internationally. It's absolutely essential that this group stays together. I know that Kerry, when she starts on the 1st of October, coming across to work with John Scott, who many of you, of course, know very well, I know that it's completely impossible for Kerry to take on the work of Catherine, Ian and Rob herself. But so we don't really know what the shape is. But as Rob said, partners have put their hands in their pockets, because, you know, it was just impossible to imagine that Hadrian's Wall stakeholders would talk about the wall without including the community. And the work that you've done, I photographed, Rob, those stats. I mean, I know I can look at the presentation and I know you can feed those into the board, but just the knowledge you all have, the knowledge, you're trained. And the idea that that resource would just disappear from the 1st of October is completely impossible.
So everyone else will get, all current WallCAP volunteers will get the form to opt in for me to keep your details to carry forward. Anyone who's joining tonight who wants to now get involved, my email address is in the chat, so please drop me an email. And then, like I say, moving forward, we'll revisit the legacy group from WallCAP. So we have a team of volunteers who absolutely want to do more practical work and research, and we're thinking about the idea of maybe setting up as a constituted group. That's still to explore. And also I'll be looking at supporting community-led sort of initiatives along the wall, whilst also assisting John from the coordinator with some of the more sort of wall-wide partnership activities. So there's lots going on. I think the skill for me is going to be to manage that time. There's a lot of expectation. All of those areas could be a full-time role, but point being, there'll still be a me around. So if anyone has any ideas for projects, or you're just interested in, if you don't already volunteer along the wall and you want to get involved, feel free to drop me an email and I can either signpost or you can get involved in the things that we might be doing. I say I'm gonna have to stop saying that, it's me. No, I think if anyone is interested, please just drop me an email. Really excited moving forward. Obviously for myself, for the rest of the team, people have their own plans. So yeah, it's definitely it's not the end of something. I think it's just the sort of punctuation, the comma, as we move forward into the next phase.
We will, the partners are absolutely indebted to WallCAP volunteers. Heart and soul you've put into it. Nobody on the wall is more aware of how they, people can't get out of what they're doing, and their day jobs. And then you just kept going, you kept going through COVID, you kept going through the rain. The outputs and the outcomes are astonishing. and you should win every single award that's possible in university terms, Rob, for this project. But it's obviously because of the volunteers, because of people on this screen, and then those who physically ate some cake I saw from social media, Kerry.
Oh yes, we had quite an impressive cake last week. We had a small gathering and we had a thank you cake for all the volunteers. So I'll be sharing that in the newsletter next week for our WallCAP volunteers. But yeah, I think it was an impressive way to end with an impressive cake. I'm going to start wrapping this up, but thank you, Jane, for your comments there. I think it's fair to say, as a team, we sort of felt like the hobnob of the biscuit world when it came to dunking. If anyone knows the Peter Kay reference about biscuits, some people just flake, they're like a rich tea, but I think I sometimes do refer to the team as like the hobnob, which just kept going, just again, dunk again, what's going to be chucked at the project? And we just seem to manage to navigate through. We're all, quite tired, but I think it's fair to say we're all very proud of the project as well. So I hope I speak on behalf of everyone on the sort of staff side of the team. But yeah, just a huge, immeasurable thank you to volunteers for time, effort, commitment, enthusiasm, skill, everything that you brought to this project. I personally, through managing the volunteer side of the programme, it's been an absolute privilege, and I'm really happy that we can take this forward beyond into October. So thanks, Steve. I like being a hobnob. But thank you everyone for your time this evening, and we look forward to hopefully seeing a lot of these faces again, if we can maybe keep something like this going beyond WallCAP. That's one of our aspirations, or one of mine indeed. So thank you everybody, have a nice evening, and you'll be in touch. I'll be in touch with you if you're one of our WallCAP volunteers. So thanks very much everyone. Good night.